Why is the U.S. Air Force fighting Israeli fighter jets? Just because those aircraft might be deemed technologically inferior didn't mean their pilots couldn't cleverly employ them in ways that exploited weaknesses in American fighters and pilot training. To practice against subsonic dogfighters, several companies operate various versions of the venerable A-4 Skyhawk attack jet and the 1950s-era Hawker Hunter fighter, both of which saw extensive air combat during the Cold War, as well as light attack trainers like the Alpha Jet, Bay Hawk, Jet Provost, MB-339 and Strikemaster. On October 18, the U.S. Air Force awarded a $6.40 to $7.5 billion contract to 7 private companies to provide aggressor air combat training services to the Air Force through 2024. That huge sum is all dedicated to one goal: sharpening the skills of Air Force fighter pilots by putting them in realistic air battles against foreign jet fighters. The U.S. military introduced aggressor squadrons back in the 1960s after learning in air combat over Vietnam that fighter jocks needed to practice fighting dissimilar aircraft using dissimilar tactics. Just because those aircraft might be deemed technologically inferior didn't mean their pilots couldn't cleverly employ them in ways that exploited weaknesses in American fighters and pilot training. For example, the supersonic American F-4 Phantom had sophisticated radar and Sparrow missiles that allowed them to engage subsonic, cannon-armed MiG-17 fighters from miles away. But the North Vietnamese naturally didn't go along with the American playbook. Their controllers devised tactics that minimized their exposure to long-range attacks, allowing them to engage in close-range dogfights American pilots hadn't trained for, and the more primitive Soviet jets' maneuverability and cannons gave it an advantage. Learning from this, the Air Force and Navy formed aggressor training squadrons using aircraft like the F-5 Freedom Fighter and A-4 Skyhawk to simulate the performance profile of various Soviet jets. But despite its immense value, the Air Force is now struggling to afford the costs of operating aggressor units, particularly those equipped with modern U.S. fighters, which cost tens of thousands of dollars per flight hour. Nor can it easily spare the personnel due to the heavy operational demands placed on Air Force squadrons. Thus, in 2015, the Air Force turned to a novel new solution. It began hiring private companies operating fleets of old, cheap-to-fly foreign jet fighters to serve as the aggressors for training. The latest huge contract shows that the Air Force considers that initiative to be a success, and is broadly committing to the privately operated model of aggressor training.